This is Laura Rubalcaba on Sacramento Soapbox, filling in with Jeannie Keltner tonight. I'm going to be talking to the team leader, part of the team leaders of Sacramento Faces Race, which is a racial justice organization working here in Sacramento. Our show tonight is sponsored by Pieces Pizza, who is on 21st Street, makes fabulous pizza. I love their pizza. They've sponsored this show for a long time, and we really appreciate their sponsorship. We're also sponsored by Humor Times by James Israel. This is an excellent publication here in Sacramento that has political humor in it. So if you like to get your political funny bone on, this is the place to do it. Humor Times. So tonight's show, Sacramento Faces Race. So tonight I have Lynn, how do you say your last name again?
Berkley-Baskin.
Berkley-Baskin. And so tell us about Sacramento Faces Race.
Wow, it's a project that grew out of several different things. I think certainly I came off of the Just Justice Project or forum, the community forum with Mayor Johnson and the NAACP. And after having discussed that and taken part in all of the conversations for months around that, there was lots of action about Michael Brown, lots of citywide discussion as well as marches. And so what we ended up doing is asking the community, a lot of the white community, if they would join us in those marches. And although there were white people joining us in those marches, not very many. And so I went to several white people and asked them would they take part in this, and they wanted to, but it wasn't something that they felt comfortable about. And so I started to get frustrated and thought, what could I do? And I happened to be active in the Jewish community too. And there, I was on a national phone call with lots of Jewish leaders in the country. And they were doing marches in the Jewish community in cities all across the United States. And they asked, Lynn, when are you going to do a march in Sacramento? And they kind of put me to the task. And at the time, I was in finals, and I thought, okay, I'll try to do that. And that's when I asked all of these people if they would do the march, and they said no. I mean, the bottom line, it wasn't that they weren't supportive and disturbed by what was going on. They just didn't feel comfortable. So that's when I knew I needed to do something, and I had to go back to the national phone call and with my tail between my legs and say, I can't do a march, because one of the great things about these marches throughout the country was that even though it was kind of hosted or sponsored or organized by Jewish organizations throughout the country, lots of people came out, including the Muslim community, and they held signs that say, Muslims and Jews say Black Lives Matter. And that was something extraordinary, certainly considering the climate right now. And so moving forward, I started to do focus groups with mostly white people, and ask questions about what they thought of Michael Brown or what they thought of Trayvon Martin. And it became very, very clear that they didn't know a whole lot about the situations, even though there are some of us who are just disturbed to our core about it, and we're seeing patterns in the United States. But even so, when I started asking them about their understanding of the Black American community, they related it only to things like poverty. And, and if I asked them how they were supporting change in the institution of racism, their answers would be things like, we would go to a soup kitchen, which is not a bad thing. It's not bad that people devote their times to doing these community actions, but it told me that we need to do a lot of work in educating, especially the white population, about institutional and systemic racism and unconscious bias specifically. So that's what we endeavored to do. So at that point, I decided we need to do some teaching, and that's how Sacramento Faces Race was born into something that we wanted to do teach-ins. So we did teach-ins throughout the community.
So you were asked to do a march, and you went back and said, I can't do a march. And they said, well, maybe you can do something else. And then you said, okay, Sacramento Faces Race, we're going to do teach-ins. And that's how it was born.
Really?
I have to tell you, I've never told you this, but when I first heard Sacramento Faces Race, I didn't understand, and I thought it might be a race.
A lot of people do.
Yeah, and I thought it might have to do with Faces, the gay bar in town. Yeah,
right.
So I was like, sounds like
LGBTQ. I understand that too.
Could be pretty flamey, you know.
Well, we have to.
So I didn't know what it was, and I didn't have a chance to go to some of the really excellent things that you organized earlier this week. But I did go to your voting rights commemoration at the Capitol, and it was just absolutely beautiful. I
Mr.
absolutely
MLK.
loved it. Yes, let's go ahead and learn some more about our other guests here at the table. Could you go ahead and introduce them?
Sure. This is Pastor John A. Heath. He is the Executive Director of Cal Kappa, and he's part of the Leadership Advisory for Sacramento Faces Race. And to your point, we did a reenactment, and John was amazing. People have told me since that action we did at the Capitol steps on August 6th, so it was the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, that they just closed their eyes and they thought that John was Dr. King. Like they were really reliving that. Is that how you felt?
So I was holding the little applause sign, so I didn't see what was going on behind me, and I thought it was a recording, an actual recording of King. That's what I thought was going on. I didn't even know it was a live person.
He did an amazing job, just a tremendous job with the reenactment. And of course, it was his speech, so it was Dr. King's words.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. And you have a great voice.
Well, you're quite kind. And how I found myself involved, obviously, Ms. Berkley-Baskin is very persuasive and not shy about seeking out folks who she feels might bring some added value. My role with race issues really spans back to a child. I was one of those northeastern kids in Connecticut who was bussed out through a busing program, had to deal with that tension, racial tension, being called the N-word every day, and having to go through that. I had my elementary school teacher, Mr. Eisenberg, wonderful fella, who tried to be as understanding as he could, but I don't really think he could grasp some of the challenges as it relates to being a barrier breaker. I was one of the first African-American children that my classmates had ever dealt with. So going up in white public schools, quote unquote, allowed me to be a bridge builder as it relates to race, coming out of an urban, mostly black environment. So this is a journey that I've been going on for quite some time. So when the opportunity arose to become involved, certainly stepped in to see how we can contribute here in Sacramento.
Oh, that's excellent. And you're a pastor?
Yes, pastor. I've pastored about 20 some odd years now. Currently we're doing pastors coaching with a group Ministry Advantage, and perhaps maybe looking at taking over a pastorate in the local community. But my day job is fighting poverty, which does oftentimes have a racial link to it, with the California Community Action Partnership Association here in California.
Nice, nice. It's one of the things I liked about Sacramento Faces Race, because there's been a lot of Black Lives Matter groups that have come up and gone back and come up and gone back, and I've been watching to see like what was really going to take hold and what the kind of energy was going to be. And I really like the group that you've put together, because you are working with clergy and you are working with congregations, and I believe you're also working with students quite a bit. Speaking of
Mr. Jose Calderon, we actually were classmates. I'm a post-bac student, and Jose we shared a class in what was it, race, gender, and inequality, and we just hit it off. And Jose is incredibly well versed in understanding marginalized peoples, and especially here in the community. Right. And so I invited him to be aboard, and he's been tweeting for months now. So.
Right. So for our Twitter followers, we're at Sac Faces Race. Right now we have about 50, 70 followers, and we would like to get more, of course. But one of the things is, cool.
So, yeah.
Bridging a mutual struggle, since this cannot be done alone as a community regardless.
So if the viewer would like more information, you can go to sacramentofacesrace.com to learn more. That's a website that's currently being worked on, but it's going to get better and have more information going forward.
It's not updated as quickly as we'd like it to be, but you can contact us through it for sure. We always,
that definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. It works.
I was able to contact you through that.
Yes. And Jose is doing Twitter. And then we have a Facebook page as well. So please find us on the community part of the Facebook page.
And that's a Sacramento Faces Race also on Facebook. And then the Twitter is?
At Sacramento Faces Race.
Spelled out. No,
at Sac Faces Race.
Sac or Sacramento?
Sacramento Faces Race is what our page is under, but our ad is under Sac Faces Race.
So just Sac Faces Race.
For Twitter? For Twitter,
right,
yes.
So it's at Sac Faces Race.
Right. Thank you.
Abbreviated.
Yeah.
And then you're at Folsom City College?
Folsom Lake College, yes. And one of the things we helped out with the focus groups, developing teach-ins, raising awareness not just in Sacramento, but also in the country as a whole, since we have to network and make this a national movement. This is a thing of leadership where if it starts in Sacramento, because everyone in the African American community, the Latino community, the Jewish community, the Muslim community, everyone is willing to move forward, since we're all people regardless of our color. So we've been networking with various organizations in and around the country to not only market but distribute our mission and make this a national movement eventually.
Right, so we do have AmericaFacesRace.com as well. We just haven't built it out yet. So we're hoping that it will be a model for the country. We just have to make sure it works here. So Jose's exactly right. Exactly.
And is there a lot of interest in your at Folsom Lake College about the racial issues? What's the...
It is a big issue, since we sit in committees, we sit in board meetings, we sit in student life meetings. We built a club on the backbone of the class where Lynn and I met, and it's been transforming the campus left and right.
Oh, so there's a multicultural and diversity committee that Professor Diane Carlson, who's also on the leadership team for Sacramento Faces Race, she is heading that up. And Jose is a student on that from Diversity Club. I'm a guest. I often go to the meetings. And Brenda Anzuris is also one of the leaders at Diversity Club, who's also part of leadership for Sacramento Faces Race. So we have a lot of cross-pollination to make sure that this works. But the Multicultural and Diversity Committee has really been very helpful at Folsom Lake College in helping advise us, and certainly Diane Carlson in particular. She's just been amazing. So
tell me what Sacramento Faces Race has been doing. You're fairly new, started maybe around the end of last year, beginning of this year.
Very end, yeah. So really the beginning of January, we did the focus groups and spoke to over 100 people to try and get a direction and a pulse on where specifically the Eastern Corridor, although we did interview some people in the Arden area and in South Sac as well, but all of them are white with a few exceptions. I was very careful in those groups to pair them. So we had lots of corporate folks all together. We asked people to bring friends, so I didn't know everybody in these groups. But as it became more clear where the pulse was, we started to look at ways that our leadership group could focus on curriculum building for those teach-ins. And so we chose a date, June 12th or 14th. It was kind of the obvious date. It had a lot of relevance to race and injustice because it was the weekend before Juneteenth, which of course marks the final end of formal slavery. And it was also Loving Day, so the end of it marked the Supreme Court Loving decision. And it also, I think, had something to do with Anne Frank. I don't remember, but all of those things came together, and I thought this has to be the weekend. So that's why we chose that weekend. And we had 10 teach-ins throughout the city, and we had 22 private ones. So 10 public ones, 22 private ones.
How many people attended?
All those, 750 in total for those teach-ins. So we were educating that many people, and we had great facilitation. Certainly Folsom Lake College did one, and Dr. Carlson facilitated that along, and Jose was there, and Brenda was there. And so that was wonderful. But we also had some Elk Grove teachers who are trained by an organization called SEED. Peggy McIntosh is kind of one of these icons in the sociology field, and she founded this organization called SEED, which is Seeking Education, Equality, and Diversity. And it trains teachers and educators and people who are related and invested in education how to have equality in the classroom. And so they committed, they called me out of the blue. This was just an action, a project. This had no funding, it's totally grassroots. And basically between Twitter and Facebook and some press releases, people just started coming out of the woodwork saying, we want to help. And so some of these SEED folks said, we'll do a facilitated teach-in in Elk Grove. And they did, and we've partnered now with them, and we're looking to do more. So it was a great weekend. It was great. We did the Hip Hop Green Dinner.
So tell me more about that, because that was real exciting.
Go ahead, Jose.
So we had a few guests from Hip Hop Green Dinner in a community park center, host a dinner / dance / teach-in. Since we had DJ Cabum. He has a couple of TED Talks. He's kind of famous, and he raps about eating healthy. Since those of us who are in a socioeconomic level in the lower end sadly do not eat properly because of budget reasons. So he talked about eating healthy, how it connects to the systematic way of life today, and he was handing out mangoes and dandelions and everything that was fed was thank you to Rayleigh's. And it was all organic, it was all local. So one of the things was that the community in Hip Hop Green Dinner made this event happen.
Yeah, for sure. It was great.
And this is that associated with Van Jones.
So Van worked with Keith Tucker. So Keith was the founder. Van Jones worked with Keith Tucker at some point in the history of Hip Hop Green Dinner. And now they take it on the road. So Keith is doing a national Hip Hop Green Dinner now and looking to make it a really big deal because it combines things like racial injustice and food justice. Of course, food deserts exist in a lot of our urban areas, and that's probably something more that John can speak to.
Certainly. I've worked pretty much all over the country related to some of the disparity issues that obviously fall along racial lines. In Dallas, when I served as Assistant Director of Juvenile Services, obviously dealt with race on several issues with great police leaders. I have to say Dallas, I was shocked, but has some of the most forward-thinking police chiefs, and we were able to reduce minority contact with young people with a coordinated strategy, getting them involved, and to see that there was implicit bias, to see that when we look at a young person who's from South Dallas, we look at that child a little bit differently than the white kid from Highland Park. I was just totally blown away when one police chief said, "You will never see our young people." This was a white police chief who served a
What did he
predominantly
mean by
wealthy.
that?
Well, because those folks have means. They golf with the municipal judge. They have those relationships. They have great attorneys.
Wasn't Texas where they had that affluenza case?
Yes, they did. But they were able to create, in essence, almost a separate justice system. Even when we talk about the food insecurity, my good friend, the president of Paul Quinn College, took over a college. Michael Sorrell was able to repurpose part of the college campus. So they have literally wonderful gardens that they're using to not only as a social enterprise vehicle, supplying grocery stores and restaurants, but also they're able to provide food for the local community. And they've been recognized in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times. So when we talk about race, it falls into so many different areas, but where Lynn and her compatriots come into play is, as an African American or as a Latino, when we talk about racial issues, no one listens. We're whining, we're just making much ado about nothing. But when there is agreement from Anglos, that in essence gives the subject a little bit more legitimacy, unfortunately. And historically, that was the case even back, and we see ourselves kind of cyclically repeating some things. Even when the civil rights movement really got traction, it was because it had an infusion of white Protestant ministers and Jewish rabbis and others who said, you know what, enough is enough. It wasn't until we saw Bloody Sunday on TV that white America really looked at this racial problem in the South as something that we really needed to dive into. So this work that's being done is so critical even now in the 21st century.
Well, in this talk of food deserts, I know I went to something in Oak Park, and apparently there's like one grocery store serving 115 residents in Oak Park. But this I kind of want to segue into urban ag, because that's something that's just passed and should really be helpful, and hopefully there will be some real moves to build some gardens all throughout these areas that have food deserts. So I was very proud of City Council for actually putting through the urban ag ordinance this year.
I think that Mayor Johnson is very, very conscientious when it comes to creating this farm to fork capital, and that's urban ag is a part of that. And I want to say too, related to Hip Hop Green Dinner, we had Israel Family Farms a part of that, and Canoke was really so helpful in making sure that, because we did use the Oak Park Community Center for Hip Hop Green Dinner, and it was really wonderful. We had over 100 people there, and it combined everything from hip hop and spoken word to food justice issues, and certainly food desert issues, food insecurity issues, and they wrapped it all up in this great program, and it was just a lot of fun. Plus, the other thing I was really happy about was Raley's really came through. That program wouldn't have happened without Raley's. They made a huge commitment to that program, and California Endowment did help as well. But one of the things that happened is Raley stepped in, and they actually, everything was organic, everything was local. The chef herself, and I wish I could think of her name so I could plug her, but she was actually at one point homeless. And Rabbi David Wexler-Azen connected with her and brought her in as the chef for that event. And it was wonderful. It was just a great event, and I hope we can do it again. It was costly, but I think that the community needs events like that so that we can teach. We can teach about healthy eating and how that relates to other diseases, and success. Long-term success is based on, you can see that as a root cause of the trajectory of someone's life.
I've lived in some of the hardest hit cities, Baltimore, Hartford, Connecticut, those cities that are always in the top 10 negatives. And one of the challenges we have and I've worked at every level of government for elected officials, and it's amazing the type of hoops you have to go through to get adequate grocery stores and to be able to make sure that there's produce available. And then when you have people who are on the lower socioeconomic rung, to eat right costs. Not everyone has Whole Foods money.
Yeah, speaking of Whole Foods, so they're building a new Whole Foods in Midtown.
I heard.
Very near the Safeway, very near the Natural Food Co-op. And I love, Whole Foods going into Midtown, but I have to wonder, about the rest of the city of Sacramento that doesn't have,
Sure.
So, of course, Whole Foods puts their thing down in downtown and Midtown because of, the money. They want to be able to make the sales. So I don't know how you get them to take their products, which cost more, out into neighborhoods that have less money. But I think that's where you start winding into all kinds of issues like, minimum wage. Like if we raise the wages, then, Whole Foods would have a reason to go out into more neighborhoods if there was more money. So I think you can trace a lot of problems back to those wage policies.
Sure. I think the challenge is, however, if I put my poverty hat on, with California having now the supplemental poverty measure, which really takes into effect costs. The way the government really measures poverty is flawed, particularly in California, where, for example, if I'm in Silicon Valley, making $100,000 does not stretch you a whole lot. So we really have to understand that there is a much more complex way that we have to look at poverty, because if you raise the minimum wage, but housing costs are still high and all those other factors, can you really support a family on $15 an hour? No. So I think we really need to look at this. The middle class now perhaps needs to be a vehicle or an entity that we look at in terms of affordable housing and redefining what affordable housing is.
And I know that Mayor Johnson has a plan to do 10,000 he has a plan to do 10,000 new housing units, because one of the problems in Sacramento having unaffordable housing is that there's a shortage of housing. So he's planning on 10,000 over 10 years, and I think 40% are supposed to be at market rate, not at market rate, but at a working wage. Okay, so not market rate. The 60% are market rate, and then like 40, I think, are at what a minimum wage worker. A worker would be able to make, and then even the lower Section 8 kind of public housing below that. But one of the questions I want to ask is all that affordable housing going to be rentals? Because I don't want to live in a city that a few people own all the properties and everybody is renting, even if it's affordable rents. That's not a city I want to live in. So to me, the question becomes: is that affordable rentals, or is that where are the affordable home ownership opportunities? Because that's really important, and I think it's short shrift to sell to the populations of Sacramento this idea of affordable housing that's just rental.
Sure.
You're speaking a lot to the institutional part of all of this, right? And that's the core of what we're trying to teach about.
And I remember when we had a conversation about this earlier, something you said earlier here tonight too, and you said, that we really want to educate white people about racism. But when I talked to you earlier, you said, you know what? It's not just white people, because, people of color understand the racism that they experience, but the whole other level, the institutional level of racism, nobody really understands that, I think. Really appreciates it. I can tell you, as a white person, white privilege is extremely hard to see. It takes a lot. And for me, when there was the police brutality murder of the man in Fullerton, Kelly Thomas, he was a homeless man. He was beaten to death. It was really ugly. Kelly Thomas had really long red hair, just like my son. It was so difficult for me to see him and beat, and to see him afterwards and his cries and everything, because it reminded me of my son. And it hit me on the head that is what a black mother feels every single time.
Right. She hears it every single time. She
Every
hears.
single time she sees a black kid, it's like, that could be my kid. And so that one time I experienced it because of the red hair, and it was profound.
Well, and I think, again, I've worked with law enforcement folks. I've been a part of law enforcement, served as a chaplain for numerous agencies and also umbrella groups. There is a difference, and I don't think that really resonates, and I appreciate your transparency in sharing that, because that is a fear that black mothers have, not only for their sons, but now for their daughters, with the case in Texas, where I used to live, right up the street in Waller County, an area that I've traversed many a day. And so there are some inherent fears. For example, when I'm traveling, I very seldom travel in sweats or in casual clothes. I travel in a suit because there is a different way that I'm treated when I'm quote unquote suited and booted than when I'm in my casual gear. Unfortunately, that is the case. I have a young son who is a freshman in college, football player, and I had a very frank discussion with him about his deportment and how he should carry himself, even as a student athlete, because there are going to be some unique things that he's going to face that his white counterparts don't face. You said something about white privilege, and I worked for Governor Bob Ehrlich, first Republican governor in 36 years, and I said something to him. I said, Governor, you know, you're a kid, his story was told that he was of working class parents, got a scholarship to go to an elite prep school, and then from there his story just went on, Ivy League, Wake Forest Law. But I said, you're able to transcend things because of your color. And so when people look at you, they don't see the white kid from across the tracks. They see one of them. And so you will be able to assimilate in a way that I never will.
It's very true. And I was talking with a friend recently, and while we were talking, another friend of his comes up and they start talking about a job. So these are two white guys talking about a job, and he's going to help him get a job there. And I just knew that that conversation would not have happened with a black man, and that there is this insider club, and it's so disingenuous to blame people of color for not making progress in a system that's stacked absolutely against them.
Well, you point to something that's so true. Having worked on both sides of the aisle, I've seen things in different perspectives, but you point to something that is so real, and we talk about implicit bias and things of that nature, but then there's that common thread that we connect to people that we know, that we're comfortable with, that I go to church with or synagogue, and so then the responsibility for us to understand that it's not inherently racist, it's just inherently human. And so one of the things that we did in Maryland with the Minority Business Enterprise was take majority companies, white-owned companies, pair them with a minority-owned business who they never would have been able to do business with. Right. And then guess what? They found out these people actually work hard and do great work. And so these folks were able to move from being a small contractor to now growing their business because of the confidence, and watch this now, the relationship that they had. Jack Kemp is one of my mentors, a great man who passed away some time ago. But Jack tells the story how his whole world changed when he got into the NFL and was able to deal with black men from a different standpoint than he had before. And I think that's why, as a Republican, he was able to sit on historically black college boards and things of that nature, because he had the relationships. And so what Sacramento Faces Race is really trying to get us to do is to create relationships that will promote the understanding that I may not agree, but perhaps I might have a little bit more empathy. It is not that people want to be in a certain situation, but there are systemic pieces that really place us in those type of situations, and we're not able to get out of them.
Right. So, were you going to say something, Jose?
Well, having lived that myself, it not only transcends to the job market, but also the college system. One of the things that I had to learn was to do everything myself. I'm the first one going to college in my family, despite not being the oldest. And you know, for example, hunting for a university, Lynn has helped me with that recently. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't know where I would be going, since in most predominantly Caucasian communities, the students tend to go where their parents went, or where one of their friends' parents went, or a relative of theirs went. For me, there weren't those connections, or for anyone else that comes from a lower socioeconomic, or the neighborhood, as pop culture calls it. And I feel like there needs to be a little bit more implementing. And that's one of the things we are doing. For example, sitting in committees, sitting in board meetings, sitting in a club. It's about changing what has needed to change, one step at a time.
So one of the things that Jose is referencing is at Folsom Lake College, because of the Multicultural and Diversity Committee, and because of people like Diane Carlson and Melanie Dixon and Bernard Gibson, these people have allowed, I won't even say allowed, they have recognized that there's a system that's not even known to people. And Jose walks into a system where he's lost, and that there have to be some kinds of signals along the way to help students, and signs to help students find their way and navigate this system. And of course, the community college systems are very good at that in general, but they have lots of improvement, especially with students who haven't navigated these systems before. So the community college system is great if it's your hometown college, and you're kind of used to hearing the term college in your home, and you're used to people having gone through college. It's a great option for saving money. It's a great option for lots of things. But for someone who has inherently been separated from that system their whole life, like Jose, there needs to be more. And so what he's saying now is that particular school is really taking action because of those people, in helping build something, create a system, so that we can actually do more of these relationship building connections. And to John's point too, part of building these relationships and learning from each other, when you build a relationship with someone, because we're human beings, we care, we develop, we use this word empathy, but we don't really put the string to it, which means that it means something to us. When someone we care about, we're not just empathetic toward them.
Almost like we're empathetic from them.
Right, right.
It's a real connection.
But what you said earlier, your story, seeing the long red hair, it's even more than that, because you didn't even have a relationship. So you felt empathy, but once you have the relationship with that empathy, you care, you react, you invest. And
there's a multiplier and an amplifier.
Right.
When you have a relationship.
Yeah, that beating death was different. Was very different for me, because I did make a personal connection on that one. And a white person doesn't do that with a black person, unless they have black children. you know, then I think they do.
Yeah.
And I think
And it really comes down to our children. That's what we love and care. We all,
exactly, and I
regardless of race, love
Yeah.
our children
Yeah.
oh, absolutely.
and
I
want
think-
them protected. I want good things for them.
Right.
College, home ownership.
We do. We love our own children, but we have to start loving other people's children.
I do.
I know.
I love children.
I know. I think everyone at this table does, but I think one of the, and it's not that people aren't philanthropic. This isn't about people not being philanthropic. This is about people investing in each other personally. It's easy to write a check, and I'm not downplaying the people who write checks. I'm not suggesting that that's not needed and appreciated, but there's something that happens when you make a personal connection that is unlike anything else we can do, and that is one of the greatest investments we can make in one another.
And one of the other pieces is that when we talk about this subject of race, it is a powerful experience to see a white person hold another white person accountable. It's a powerful experience because oftentimes an individual can maybe just be caught off guard and they'll laugh it off, but there won't be an immediate, to use a term from the hood, they're not checked when they perhaps speak about a person in a derogatory term, or if they're perpetuating a gross stereotype. And what Sacramento Faces Race hopes to do is equip people to be able to have that courage, to be in a setting where there perhaps is some language that isn't the best language to use, is rather derogatory, and to give that person the tools and the courage to be able to say, hey, hold up. What would you think if that was your child? Our perceptions, the sense of black babies who still choose white dolls over black dolls.
And the study has
in
been
the
done
21st
over and over.
century.
Yes.
And so this whole idea, I was blessed again to be a student at a historically white area. I found myself not feeling inferior, perhaps like some of the folks in my neighborhood did. And subsequently, I've been able to go all over this country, work on Capitol Hill, serve as a White House liaison, because I always saw myself as an equal.
Right. That's powerful. And it's necessary to be successful, is to see yourself as at least an equal. If you see yourself as subservient, you're never going to, stand up for yourself. You're never going to, you're never going to feel you deserve to be successful.
And so that's one of the things that with this, we have to kind of reverse teach, is that idea of worth, that idea of an understanding, particularly when we talk about from a historical perspective. Many white people are like, why do you have Black History Month? We don't have White History Month. But the fact of the matter is,
every day is White History Month.
is that there are so many unique contributions that Black people have made to this country that even Black people aren't aware of.
Right.
Sure.
Right, and that goes back to the point you made about our conversation about institutional racism and individual racism. People understand individual racism. They understand, all people understand when they're being called a name, or when you're being denied a service specifically. That, that individual racism, people get that. What they might not get is that institution that starts with, I don't have access to good food, so I'm not well fed. And because I'm not well fed, I'm not at my active state when I attend school. My mind is not at its peak. And because I'm not getting the education I should, then I continue. And so then I drop out, or I don't go to college. And if I don't go to college, then I'm not earning a wage that's livable. And by the way, I develop diabetes because I don't have health care. That is the institution. So we have to really start looking at the real root of this. And it's not just, we don't want to be removed from the institution and look at it like it's just a system that we have nothing to do with. It doesn't run by itself. People run that system. People built that system. So
and we talk about education as you were sharing about your educational experience. I served as a special assistant to a historically black college president. When I arrived there, we were talking about institutional racism, right?
Right.
The nearest white counterpart peer school, their per student capita allocation was $14,000 per student. The per capita student allocation for Coppin State University was $635 per student.
Yeah.
And this wasn't in the Deep South. This was in Maryland. This was a blue state. However, again, we had to fight, even in the 21st century, to have an equitable educational system that would educate people that historically white colleges were not educating.
Well, and I know, let's bring it into Sacramento and institutional racism, because there's a couple things I know about here in Sacramento. One of them is that, a study, the last time we did a study of the police in Sacramento, they stopped black people twice as often as they stopped white people. They stopped Hispanics 1.5 times as much. They Terry searched.
So I
Hispanics 2.5 times as much. Yeah, so that's one piece.
Well,
Let's
that
talk
is
about
true. That is true. I have some issues. One of these issues I have is that we have to use measurements and metrics that are real. Because in that same study, they showed that Folsom had a lower than usual rate of arrests of black people. Yes, that puts Folsom in this great light. But why do you think Folsom arrests fewer black people?
They're not there.
They're not there. Yes, exactly.
Got to go out to arrest.
So we have to really look at these statistics carefully. Yes, perhaps we're arresting more, but I think even to that
this
point,
was just traffic stops. These were traffic stops in Sacramento. This was something that was. I saw this. Yeah. It was. Something that was mandated by the state. The governor at the time mandated Sacramento and LA would do this. Another one for Sacramento is infant deaths.
That's huge. That's huge. The infant mortality rate in Sacramento is atrocious.
Twice.
It's criminal.
It's terrible.
It's twice. So that is institutional racism.
It is. It is.
Well, I think one of the things, certainly I've been privy to work with Sacramento PD for the short time I've been here, and certainly there is a clear focus to create a better police department, working with the community, understanding implicit bias, teaching that in the academy, the in-service training, and so I've quite frankly been quite impressed with the measures that have been taken. And I think even the chief will say that perhaps they don't reflect the diversity that you'd like within the department, but I know what it is to be accosted by bad black cops too. So I think we need to move past color and really just try to get good cops. But certainly if we can get more Latino and black and Asian, that's great. I think that there's also a clear focus by black health providers to take the bully or to take the onus upon them to really push to address black infant mortality in the city. And I think with folks coming together with the resources that exist here with the medical communities, we can see some movement.
Right.
I think we have real opportunities here in Sacramento because of our city council and because of our mayor. If we look at our city council, we got Jay Chenier, who's Jewish. We got Eric Guerrera. Rick Guerrera or Eric Guerrera? And he's Hispanic.
Yes.
Eric.
I don't remember.
I think it's Eric Guerrera.
But he is Hispanic. I know that.
Yes, and then you have Jennings and Warren and Carr are all people of color, and Mayor Johnson. So you're just left with Angela Ashby, who's a woman. So I feel like we have a city council that can really understand what it is to be on the outside.
Marginalized in some way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the challenge is in any municipality, even though you have that wonderful panorama of elected official, is how can they harness other individuals, business community and otherwise, who can then jump into this and really provide resources, because ultimately that's what it's going to take. It's going to take resources.
A commitment to resources.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And so when we talk about institutional parts of this, it is that resource part, it's the commitment. But in order to get that, here we go again, building those relationships. And so if we are really interested in getting the resources, and I know that everyone who is a community organizer or anyone who is an ED in a nonprofit, we know that we have to find money because we're not for profit. We don't have a service that we provide that we get paid for. And so we have to search for that. And in order to do that, we have to build relationships. And going back to your other comment, we have to provide numbers, metrics,
So
measurements. Yeah, real data. And so going back to your other comment, I want to say that it's important that that data be useful and that it speaks to the root of problems and not just general data about, so that particular one, it set me off a little because it doesn't really speak to, so of the people who get pulled over, how many of them are arrested versus how many white people who get pulled over are arrested? How many of them serve jail time, or go into that system that we know is just a terrible system. And that again goes to another part of the institution is that once we, go ahead. You're going to say about the criminal.
I think we've only got a couple minutes left, and I wanted to just hear.
Wow.
I know, time flies.
That really did.
But I wanted to give you a chance to talk about what Sacramento Faces Race is going to be doing.
Thank you. So we have a more than a one-dimensional approach to, ending institutional racism. So of course, teaching and education is a part of that. The other, and relationship building, collaboration. So we're collaborating with everyone we can think of, NAACP, hopefully the Urban League we'll get closer with, and we have lots of people of color on our team.
Sacramento area congregations together.
Right, SAC Act, which by the way, they're having their fundraising event, I promised to plug it, September 22nd. So please go to sacact.org. But also, the Interfaith Council of Greater Sacramento, everyone's really on board with this. So we have the collaboration point, and the Jewish community, lots of people. But now what we have to do is find out what we're on board for, because institutional racism is huge. We have to start really honing in on some things that we as a community can get behind. And so now it's about the Black community creating an agenda, a Black agenda for this community.
In Sacramento.
In Sacramento, that we can get behind, Sacramento Faces Race can get behind, and then translate that into community support on the white side. And so make sure that the Black agenda is supported.
I think that's really good too, because, well, I don't know, something you said earlier though, about you were with Mayor Johnson's thing that he did, Just Justice, and that was a really good experience for you, and that sort of rolled you into Sacramento Faces Race, didn't it?
It did. Are you speaking about the day that the decision was made? Is that what?
No,
just in general.
Just in general.
It did. Yeah, Sacramento Faces Race is about us coming together and recognizing that we have work to do.
And you have a relationship, though, with Mayor Johnson and people.
Well, not him personally, but yes.
His office.
Right. So we're working Indivisible. I attend Indivisible meetings. I attend Just Justice when that was going on. And now we have a meeting coming up with his office that I'm hoping we will take steps forward. So I hope
we have tangible outcomes that will come out of the incredible groundwork that Lynn has done.
Well, all of us are doing, and I really appreciate everyone's support.
So you're going to be rolling forward with more consensus building activities through the rest of the year, and then more commemorations come February.
Right, so February, of course, we'll work on that. We have teach-ins coming up towards the end of the year all over the city. And then we'll be training racial justice facilitators, community leaders who want to be trained so that we can teach more people and build capacity.
That'll be great. You know, I really appreciate, I think we're about to wrap up now. I appreciate everybody coming down here. You've all been wonderful to talk to.
Thank you.
And you have just so much institutional experience yourself. It's amazing that you got this resource, and then someone in the college campuses. It's also super important. So I think you're really doing great work, Lynn.
Thank you. I'm
And
so
your team,
fortunate. The
'cause I
team is
know,
just amazing.
right?
Pinch me. Everybody fell out of heaven. Yeah. Thank you.
So I'd like to thank our graphics, Vicky Rand, audio engineering, Greg Popejoy, playback operator, Craig Popejoy, set and lighting, Steve Baruso, floor manager, Tim Rowe, cameraman, Tim Rowe. I'd like to thank the viewers also for watching with us tonight on Sacramento Soapbox. Thank you very much.
Hands to the heavens, no man, no weapon formed against, yes, glory is destined. Everyday women and men become legends. Sins that go against our skin become blessings. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice